AVP.
We're back with Dr. Dwayne. When I have a problem or I want to educate people on something, I go and ask Dr. Dwayne for his help, and he's always willing. He helped me in the past. But today's a pretty touchy subject, but we're going to shed some light on it. But first of all, you're in Portugal, you said?
Yeah, I'm in Portugal. I'm in Lisbon right now.
How is that? Is it good?
Yeah, it's nice. It's good food, sunshine, pretty ladies, all the good stuff.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Perfect. So we're going to go right into it. There's been a lot of influencers, fitness models, and aspiring bodybuilders. But mostly the influencers online, they've been like kind of glorifying the party scene. You see them at like music festivals, shirtless, looking awesome with the girl, the sunglasses. And then it's kind of like, I think it started with Ziz back in the day. Ziz was this very aesthetic fitness bodybuilder type of guy. And sadly, he passed away. I don't know exactly what happened, but a lot of people say it was related to his lifestyle, and to be honest, I'm not gonna we're not judging anybody's choices here. I was like the worst guy regarding all that stuff before, but then I turned around because I was actually slowly and fastly killing myself, and I had to seek some help. Did 5 rehabs, and now I'm on the right path. Obviously, turned around, but it's a constant not struggle anymore, but it's a constant like where I got to be on. I got to be sharp every day and make sure I look at my motives of what I'm doing, my intentions, and who I'm hanging out, what I'm what supplements I take and things like that. But yeah. So Dwayne, I know you either helped people in the past and had experiences yourself, so that's why you're in a good spot to talk about that. So the podcast will be about that and also how to prevent heart attack for bodybuilders. So put your headphones on, zone in, and we're going to talk about it. So there's one thing that I found very interesting. I remember back in the days, BLP. You know who BLP is?
Well, I don't. Yeah, I was on those forums. That was the the Canadian
Yeah, yeah.
bodybuilding
So
forums, or
I
were
remember.
the good old days.
Yeah, because yeah, I know. I remember in Montreal. I went to see him one time at his place for something. I don't remember what it was, but I remember he said, "Hey, you either can do party drugs and party, or do bodybuilding and take gear. But you can't do both. You have to choose." I remember he said that because I think he was onto something. Because I think when you mix both, you actually doubling the side effects of both, and it can be very dangerous for some people. And there's even guys like right now that allegedly are doing like a harder lifestyle. Joe Skywalker is another guy. Another guy. Greg Doucette's been saying that Toki is another person who's glorifying these types of behaviors. I don't know if they're doing it or not, but that's just what I've heard from being on YouTube. So, but yeah. So why would combining rec drugs and anabolic drugs be more dangerous than just doing any one of them?
Well, because they're going to have synergistic effects where, like, basically taking one or the other and adding them together equals more than, just the two drugs themselves. And it's because especially, and it really depends on the drugs, but most of the ones we're talking about in, the EDM dance party scene and everything else are going to be mainly stimulant based drugs, cocaine, MDMA, these kind of things, meth. And so when we're dealing with the cardiovascular stress and the organ stress that we get just from using anabolics and the training, as well as the eating and everything else that's involved, and then that alone creates a pretty good stress for the heart. And that's, why we see a lot of our friends dealing with issues with the cardiovascular system, kidneys, liver, these kind of things. So when you combine drugs like these,
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. A little 20-second ad break here to make sure that you guys know that this podcast is made possible by Jack Factory. So check out in my description. There's some links in there. Click them just to show support. Get some stuff. Check out our pre-workouts, creatine, protein, all that kind of stuff. Thank you for watching. Let's get back to it.
you end up mounting a much larger effect than the individual responses added up together. So, for example, anabolic steroids, Testosterone in general at high doses does increase blood pressure, does lead to dyslipidemias, so low HDL cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol, increases heart rate, as we've all felt. All those things happen independent where we're taking high levels of even just testosterone. Now, if you mount on top of that, you know, a few caterpillar lines of blow or double downing on a couple of, pills of MDMA, we're going to run the risk much higher of some cardiovascular collapse, especially in that acute phase, like actually at the dance party, you know? Steroids are
Mm.
insidious, right? Anabolics are insidious. They take time to create their effects. But stimulant drugs are acute. They happen right away. And that's why when we have the two together, a lot of people don't know where their cardiovascular health sits when they're, doing anabolics. They mount on top of that, a real high heart rate as well as dehydration and everything else involved. And we've just increased our cardiovascular stress, more than twofold.
Yeah, for example, it's I guess the really bad effects won't happen right away because let's say if you're starting doing both gear and rec drugs at like 20 years old, so the first 2 years you won't have really the side effects of the gear that really like are doing something really dangerous for you, but you're gonna have already the danger effect of the rec drugs. But then after 2 years of doing them both, they kind of like one catches up to the other, I guess is that what you're saying, and then at some point down a few years down the line can be very fatal. And the thing is, for example, like I don't know what happened with Joe Skywalker. I don't know if you know him, but he's an influencer. He was into that party stuff, and then he was always ripped. So people are suspecting he was using a lot of like stuff to. He even had a shirt that says "Trendsetter," like TREN setter. So he was open about like his use, and then he something happened. He was away. Then he came. He said his ankle swelled up. Went to the hospital. Then he has congenital heart failure, so his heart is functioning at a very low rate. So what could have caused something like that if that's what is the diagnosis? You know?
Yeah, so congestive heart failure is probably what you're talking about. But congenitive heart failure would be like, his dad had heart failure. Now we do. So here's the thing
Oh, okay, okay.
is that in the case of guys like him and a lot of the younger folks that are, going to the EDM parties, really ripped and jacked, is that it's not just the anabolics, right? A lot of them are going there taking probably T3, probably taking Clen. Both of those are heavy, heavy stimulants of the heart. And then, stay ripped, right? And then, they could be farting around with diuretics or anything else that that can mess up the kidneys and everything else. So, in his case, heart failure, and again, I don't know his clinical case whatsoever, but in his case, heart failure could have been happening 10 years ago. And this is
Mm,
the problem. Look at that thumb up. Um, this is the
yeah,
problem with, like I said, it's insidious. Cardiovascular disease is insidious, and what that means is basically you don't really see it coming. And so the person that has their heart attack at 36, 46, they were preparing for that in their 20s. My
yeah.
example is perfect, right? My kidney transplant, kidney disease. I started having kidney problems in my 30s, and it was like, swollen ankles, high blood pressure, drinking like, liters and liters of water and soda a day. I was always thirsty, and
Mm,
I didn't really look at those signs because they, young, things are still pink. As you go through the years, I get to like 38, 40. That's when the wheels start falling off the train. But it wasn't because of something I fucking did when
mm,
I was 40 years old. It was from the years and years and
mm,
years of wear and tear that occurred. And rec drugs mounted on top of that are going to mount, like I said, acute stress because we're not, hopefully not taking them every day or going to a dance party and letting it rip. Problem is the blood pressure response, as well as the dehydration associated with the drugs that they use, are so high that their blood's like sludge for thickness, and they have these high blood pressure responses. They're out there dancing, having a great old time. And that's why you'll hear of people, dropping dead like that when they didn't have any sign. I don't know what happened. He didn't look like he was sick. And, what we see as sick or what we see as healthy isn't really what inside the body is seeing as sick
Mm.
or healthy.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody can look like really good, but inside they it doesn't mean that they're really healthy either.
Well, and that's one of the major issues with our whole fitness industry that we love so much is we placed such a massive, massive amount of health weight on being completely shredded and having veins coming, straight out our penis and into our belly button that, we're already at relatively unhealthy body fat levels by that point. And the way we have to get there and maintain this is generally unhealthy. So if we start doing unhealthy habits, staying up late, which we do, if you're at these parties, going to the after hours after the after hours, then heading to your buddy's hot tub for 3 days, hiring a bunch of hookers and taking a bunch of blow and ecstasy in there, you're setting yourself up for some trouble. If it sounds like I'm speaking
Yeah.
from experience, just this is a story from a friend.
Yeah, story from a friend. Yeah, so there's gonna be major risks with that, including STDs, but that's for maybe another conversation. But let's say with these guys, yeah, let's say with these guys, we're always ripped. Okay, I'm gonna assume they're gonna take like T3, and if they're not good at dieting, they'll take maybe a lot of it, like maybe like 50 to 100 microgram. They could take that. Clan, let's say they do clan to be ripped, then they do
Yep.
trend. They would do like anavar pills, and then they will do like let's say medium to high dose of tests, which is like 500 to like I guess a gram is a high dose of tests. Let's say they're doing that. What would be the what are the worst rec drugs that could like really fuck them up? Like what could go really like could be dangerous to mix with that?
Yeah, generally, like I said, the stimulant class drugs, like amphetamines and cocaine, MDMA, these kind of things, meth, um, those are all going to be your major contributors to sudden death. And over time, if you drive the heart really, really hard with those drugs and you make it through the dance parties, then at best, you're going to have likely an enlarged left ventricle, like a thick left ventricle or enlargement of the heart. And you could also have, a lot of calcium issues with the heart too, because of the high pressure that you've had and the lifestyle that kind of surrounds all of that behavior.
Mm. So that would be the worst mix. That would be the worst
Yeah,
mix. So
I mean, I mean, I
you
mean,
the
you're not
heart will.
if someone's taking mushrooms, if someone's taking mushrooms and they're doing steroids, I mean, don't quote me on this as this isn't a recommendation, but I don't think it's the mushrooms that's going to kill.
Yeah, we're not talking about like because weed is legal in Canada. Most of my friends they use some type of like THC either by like edibles before bed, or some of my friends they smoke every day. Or even some of them when they wake up and they train, they seem normal. So there's no really direct danger of like mixing THC with gear and training, right?
Great question. Let's get off the topic cardiovascular and talk about mental health. So one of the
Mm,
biggest issues with our industry, and I love it to death, but one of the biggest issues is there's a lot of interesting mental health cases that occur within this whole world that we live in of bodybuilding, outside of it too, but seems to be quite obvious in our court. Now we know that high levels of androgens and anabolics and whatnot do change the way we think. And people can deny this all they want. We can call it roid rage and call it whatever you want, but it does change the way you think. And there's lots of data to show in young men, young women, that there's brain remodeling because testosterone and androgens play a big role in brain development. So as we are, mucking around with the things that are causing changes there, and then adding on top of that drugs that, for example, THC is quite well established that if it's used, before the brain stops developing in males, that's, in the 20s, then it could lead to things like schizophrenia. So if we're mucking around with the juice and we're, hitting the THC to sleep and we're taking the clendistatine and we're fucking around with stimulants and everything else on top of it, there's a really good chance that we're going to deal with some sort of mental health issues within the realm of all this. Chicken or egg problem,
Yeah,
though.
something's gonna happen. Yeah,
But
something's
right.
gonna
And
happen.
are we doing it though? Are we doing it though? Are they doing it because they're escaping, or are they taking it and it causes mental health problems? And that's usually the big question. Is that is it a cause and effect thing? Point is,
Yeah, is it?
high chance you're not doing the
Yeah,
right thing.
yeah. So, for example, like, are they smoking weed to self-medicate some anxiety, or is the weed itself creating some type of like anxiety? Like, what is it? So it's kind of hard to know unless you really like stop and just see, right? Because sometimes if you would just stop and then actually do therapy, which takes a lot of work, it's like a weed is like the steroid for the mind, because it's like an easy way out, an easy way to get some results, to change the way you feel. And then the therapy would be like going more the harder way with like hard training and all this stuff, because therapy is pretty hard. Rehab, it is pretty hard. And yeah, so it's like either it's like a quick fix to an underlying problem, but if there's an underlying problem, it's not going away, because you can't be
That's right.
high all the time. And at some point, if you're high all the time, that's your new base. Your anxiety will creep back up, and you'll have to be more high or something, right? So it's a domino effect. So pretty much what I'm saying, you got to go to rehab or do some CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, to deal with your anxiety, have some tools and deal with that. And it's funny you mentioned about the weed. When I was in rehab, the people who were in there just because they were addicted to weed, they were the weirdest people. No offense, but they were like they were the most often. And a lot of time, people who were there because of weed. They were always like young males, young white males in their 20s. They were schizophrenic. They would smoke it once or twice, and then they would have the bad hand of the draw, and then they would be some of them would be like schizophrenic after like smoking twice. It would like do something to their brain, and they would become schizophrenic. So people have to understand that weed is like the safest one out there, I'm guessing, but it's not safe totally 100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
you're right. You're right. The safety isn't because we sell it, in Canada. It's legal. I mean, look at the liquor store, for crying out loud. When you go to go to buy booze,
Yeah.
it's not like you can just take as much as you want of that either, right? So, um, but
Mhm.
cannabis does have some medicinal qualities, so it can get a little bit mixed up in the grand scheme of things.
So let's go back to the more direct drug use and the stuff. So, how does dehydration could really affect health like that, and how much dehydrated would one person would be if they would do like a little bit of stimulants every day? Either they would like take speed or Adderall every day and then party on the weekend, and then just take a bunch of trend and test, and like what would the dehydration look like, and w- pretty much what's the main danger to look for besides blood pressure? Because I think high blood pressure is the biggest danger when doing all this stuff. It's like you drive your heart goes fast, and then the pressure goes up, and over time the arteries harden, and then at some point the pressure is so high, and then the arteries are not flexible anymore, and then it's going to crack, and that's a heart attack. Correct?
That's AV's version of a fucking heart
Yeah.
attack. I like
Well,
it. Yeah, the
that's how
major.
I see it. Right?
Yeah, it really depends. Most there's a couple of different ways that we can have ourselves a little bit of a cardiac arrest. Um,
Oh.
so so the first one, this would be for the older people that have been partying for a while and maybe in their 30s, or could happen earlier, but um, a true a heart attack where we have ischemia, or we have a myocardial infarction where the coronary arteries have high calcium or high blockages, right? That's what we get measured when we get a calcium score. When those have blockages, there's not enough blood flow to service the heart when it's being driven so hard over time. And so it gets starved for blood or hypoxic, not enough oxygen. And then that causes areas of the heart to die and the heart stops. Then we have heart fail, or if you're lucky, you just have heart failure. So the heart just becomes really inefficient and works like shit. That's one.
Mm.
Number two, the younger guys, and this is where dehydration and stuff comes into play. The younger guys, now, if you drive the heart really hard with, stimulants and, lack of sleep and basic stress, the heart is under massive, massive sympathetic activation. So you look at your, Apple Watch, you're like, whoa, 210 beats per minute for the last, 4 hours. And all I've been doing is sitting in a room and doing blow. That is a different story. Now, this is a neurogenic related heart complication. If we mount dehydration on top of that, there's a couple things that happen. One, arginine, vasopressin, and these kind of things go up, and that's an antidiuretic hormone. So basically, we try to hold water, but it also squeezes the vessels tighter, and it leads to high pressure because we don't have enough blood volume to make the pressure. And the second thing
Mm.
that occurs in that whole realm of things is as our blood loses plasma, and that's how we become dehydrated, then we can have increases in potassium. And if potassium gets too high in the blood, the heart will just stop. That's potassium chloride is part of the cocktail they use for, capital punishment when we kill someone by lethal injection.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the heart just stops.
I was going to say that. I was watching a show yesterday, and it's like there's three things. There's sodium something to like it's like a sedative. Then they add something to make the body paralyze, and then they shoot up the potassium chloride at the end to just stop the heart.
They could just use potassium chloride, be fine, but they try to be ethical and nice about it.
Yes, exactly. They make them like super sedated, then paralyzed, and then they stop the heart. Pretty crazy though. So pretty much, just to recap what you said, like how would the so let's say if somebody is like let's say we take a hypothetical subject and then it's like how could a 20-year-old have a heart attack right away like by partying and while he's on like clan T3, what would be the worst mix that somebody could like have a heart attack on in one weekend? Like what should you pretty much not do? Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's if you look at the literature, like the actual scientific literature, it's a lot on this. It's these combinations of drugs, right? So and like you said, you mentioned Adderall, for example. You could just be on Adderall for prescription. So now automatically you've already got an amphetamine on board. And then your blood pressure is going to be much more responsive, even if it's not high, it's going to be more responsive at least. Um, Mount that on top with say you're going to the party to do MDMA and you end up doing a couple lines of blow. All these drugs will increase pressure by different means, but they're all stimulants. So you end up driving the heart too hard. So, and the last one is when you think you got MDMA, but you got MDA, or you got some other drug that actually was just a stimulant that wasn't the one you thought it was, and that or the concentration is higher than you thought it was, and that's when you really run risk because now you don't even know you're flying blind. You don't even know what you're taking, and so really, to be honest, like any copious amounts of any recreational drug mounted on top of more recreational drugs is always going to run a higher risk for heart attack, liver failure, kidney failure, you name it. But the biggest problem in these cases is, these drugs make you party over time. Like, there's
Mhm.
not many people that rip out at 11 o'clock at night and say, hey, honey, just going out to take a couple bumps of freaking MDMA and then I'm going to, knock back an 8 ball of Coke, be home by 2, right? You mean be home by
Yeah,
2, 3 days, right? You're in some
yeah,
basement of a shitty bar at a rave, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like ends up like that, but there's some people who actually will party all night and then they stop around 9 a.m. and then they try to go to bed. I mean, but there's still risk in doing that. Because, for example, let's say somebody is like has a prescription of Adderall, and then they go out, they have a few drinks of alcohol in the mix, then they take the MDMA, and then while they're all fucked up, they made a decision, oh whatever, I'll do coke, and then there's during this time they also have had like a few vodka Red Bulls with the caffeine. So there's four stimulants there. There's the
Yep,
Adderall, there's the MDMAs, there's the coke, and then there's the caffeine, and then there's one downer, the alcohol in there. So it's like now you're kind of like doing a little cocktail, and then if you're doing that while you're on like Clen and T3, which already like drives the heart really bad, and then you have trend that like maybe like increases your anxiety. So that could be a really bad cocktail to have like a heart attack real quick, even if you're young. Correct?
absolutely. There's no question. And then there's the fact of, that a lot of people have hyperthermic issues during these times. So their body
Mm.
temperature goes way up, and dehydration, heavy stimulant use, and then hyperthermia, all then drive even more cellular breakdown, and that's when you have organ failure, heart failure, all kinds of issues. And there's been lots of cases of this in young people. I mean, you can look it up online and on PubMed.
But let's say if a young person has a really, really good heart, really healthy heart, like on the top end, like 99% percentile of like the best heart, it might not happen right away, right? But you don't know where your heart stands when you're young. Like you don't know if you have a good heart. Like, or sometimes like your dad might have a bad heart. And like, for example, like my whole family, I realized after doing the calcium score, my dad said he had like two heart attacks already. And I'm like, you didn't tell me this. Like, I didn't
I made
realize.
you ask him. I said to you when we were working together,
Yeah.
I said, has your dad ever had any heart problems? You're like, oh, I'll have to ask him.
Yeah, and my grandfather had a quadruple bypass too. So and then he caught a pneumonia while recovering. That was he survived though. I was so surprised. Like he was pretty fucking tough there. But yeah, so it's like I got to be really careful with that, and that's why I'm doing this podcast because if I maybe I would have listened to this podcast before, maybe there was a slim chance I would have made things different. But I was like on a roll. I like when you're young, you're invincible. You might not
Yep.
care about the consequences. You think, ah, not me, whatever. But some people think that and they pass away. Some people think that they have problems down the line. And I was one of them that had problems, like even with addiction and stuff. It's like it was really bad for me, but I turned around. So pretty much we've said like pretty much how to have a heart attack. But now let's say if somebody wants to like flip this around, what are like the main things like to prevent like heart attacks? And so let's say bodybuilders are at a higher risk of having a heart attack than most people. Would you say that if they're using like anabolics? Let's say
Oh,
let's say
absolutely. I
it's
mean,
yes, but
then your average Joe will absolutely. I mean, the
yes.
proof's in the
So
pudding, right?
what? So what could be the harm reduction for bodybuilders to prevent heart attacks? Like some simple points that what they could do. We can start if you want with let's say exercise. What kind of cardio could they do?
Yeah. Well, I guess number one is knowing what your blood pressure sits at. So right off
Yes.
the
Okay.
bat, the first thing is to not be in denial of your blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure, deal with it somehow. If it's high, actually like, 135, 140, 150 systolic, you're going to want to get on some sort of regimen of blood pressure medication. No fucking amount of fish oil, no amount of, curcumin or any of these things are going to lower your blood pressure down like, the medication is going to. So right off the bat, don't be in denial about your blood pressure. And know it well, what it looks like in the morning, what it looks like in the afternoon, what it looks like in the evening. Because if you can't bring your blood pressure down to a resting state in the evening or just by sitting down and relaxing, then you'll have a higher propensity for cardiovascular damage in general. Blood pressure first.
Mm.
Second one is, cardiovascular exercise. And don't just jump into hit training, like true hit training, if you haven't done it before in your life, because, well, one, you probably won't be able to do it properly. And two, you got to build that foundation so that you don't end up with arrhythmias and, having, atrial fibrillation and stuff that's associated with driving the heart really high if you're not used to doing that with exercise. So That's why I always tell people to do cardio after their training. It's a great way first to flush a lot of metabolite, slow twitch muscle that you're activating during kind of low, like just brisk walking. Will chew up that lactate and all those metabolites quite well. Uses it to make ATP, and also that's going to promote dilation and heart health in general. And if you do that, you're going to have a good foundation of mitochondrial health, which is what the heart really, really likes to have because it has to, beat indefinitely until we die. So we got to get away from, I'm going to get a soapbox here. We got to get away from this shit about don't do cardio because it's going to eat muscle. Bullshit number
Mm,
one. Second, we got to get away from don't do cardio because it doesn't burn fat. Well, it burns some fat if you're going slow enough, but we're really not looking for just fat burning benefits when we do it. We're looking to have a base of cardiovascular health so that when we're pushing things, getting up to 300 pounds, that all that muscle has a really strong pump to get the blood around it. And so, your body doesn't see body mass as, oh, I'm fat or I'm muscular when it comes to getting blood around the body. So, if you're a massive, massive guy or girl and you've got a weak heart, then your body's going to have more resistance to getting blood flow going around it, and your heart has to work harder.
mm.
So that cardiovascular background is in base is really, really, really important.
Yeah, and another thing that would be even almost more important, in my opinion, you can correct me with that, is the nutrition. So, what kind of food should be avoided, and what kind of food should be eaten if you want to prevent heart attacks for bodybuilders?
This is a good one because the same young guys, and I'm not throwing everybody in the same pool, but there's a lot of young guys that have a really poor eating habits despite their ripped physiques and everything, because they're going on the whole idea that, well, a macro is a macro, so it doesn't fucking matter if I'm having a Big Mac or I'm having a nice grass-fed steak. And there is a massive, massive difference here, folks. In fact, we know that fast food, for example, is very, very macronutrient dense. So, yeah, you can grow on it, but it's micronutrient deficient. So, for the first time in North America, we have people with obesity problems and everything else, but they also have micronutrition deficiencies. And that's because they're eating foods that aren't whole. They're eating foods that are highly processed. So the inflammation and everything that comes along with that drives vascular disease. It's one of the parts of the cascade. So diet's going to be real important. And to be real simple, eat whole foods. Like literally just walk around the outside of the
Mm.
aisles of your grocery store and buy all the good stuff and eat a variety. Go around and buy fucking vegetables that you've never eaten before and give them a whirl. Eat really high quality starches, sweet potato, rice, these kind of things. Those all will contribute more than just the macronutrient quality to your life, and they'll decrease inflammation, regulate blood glucose, keep lipids in control as much as possible. And that's the trifecta. When those three get fucked up, that look at that love to everyone. So when those ones get screwed up, um, when those three get out of alignment, that's when we have cardiovascular problems. That's when we start seeing atherosclerosis, calcium scores going up and everything else.
You should eat the fish, the salmon, fish, olive oil. So all the good fats. You make your research, find a good fat. But you're also saying vegetables, which is I don't eat much vegetables as much lately. So
That's because you're not
I'm gonna
doing
try to
anything with
find
me
a.
anymore. You fucker. You got to start eating vegetables.
What about if I blend a bunch of spinach in the morning? Is that a good start? Right? If
No,
I blend
I mean,
spinach?
it's a start. It's a start if you're not eating spinach, but it's not a great start. Um, so the reason why
No.
vegetables. Okay, so here's the vegetable thing. The reason why, they say eat the rainbow and everything else isn't because it's just some fluffy thing. The different colors in the vegetables are different phytonutrients and polyphenols. These are really, really high quality antioxidants, and they're also really good for your guts. And the different colors are there because they stop the sun from causing oxidative stress in the berries, in the vegetables, and everything else. And so, if you're eating bright colored, even root vegetables like carrots, they're high in beta carotene, vitamin A. This is really good for as an antioxidant for your eyes and everything else. When you're eating blueberries, the reason why blueberries have to have so much color, they make your teeth all blue and everything. That's because the skins are really thin. And so the sun can really penetrate. So they have to have a lot of antioxidants in them so that they can stay, healthy themselves. When we eat those, we take on those antioxidants, and that helps protect our vessels, increases our muscle mass into recovery and everything else. So blending up, spinach, but then add in some raspberries,
Blueberries.
strawberries,
Yeah.
a carrot, some blueberries, you name it. Just pick the color, just get a bunch of colors, make it colorful and be diverse. There's no
Hmm.
magic.
Okay. So that's good. So the vegetables, color vegetables, the healthy fats people can think about. They know what to do. And how would carbs affect blood pressure? Because I find if I eat a bag of candy, my blood pressure is going to go up. So I guess the carbs and the sugar should be avoided to some extent, and more have more like slow digesting carbs. So what would be like some good sources of carbs for the heart?
Yeah. So if you're eating, and we're talking bodybuilding here, right? So if you're eating a relatively high fiber diet, and I had you at one point up around 75 grams of fiber a day,
Mm.
um, that actually will slow down the glycemic response of pretty much any candy or anything like that anyway, because you've got this fiber on board mixing with it. But I don't know if you remember we did the refeeds and we do those like really high carb refeeds and your heart rate and blood pressure would go way up.
Hmm.
That's because when we do these really, really high fast sugar, um, cheat meals, refeeds, whatever, that really drives metabolism. And when we drive metabolism, thyroid goes up, heart rate goes up with that, and that drives blood pressure. So we can end up with higher blood pressure. There's nothing wrong with, carbohydrates whatsoever. They're great. They're very, very valuable macronutrients, as important as anything else. But you want to make sure that you're, getting in some high quality starches in with, your carbohydrate intake, and it's not all coming from, uh, you know, uh, cereals like, junk cereals like Lucky Charms and shit like that.
It's funny because sometimes I would have a big carb meal, whatever, like then I have the baby on my chest, and I can see the baby like just like moving because my heart is beating strong. The baby's just like bouncing up and down, and the baby likes it because I think he's hearing the heart, which remembers him when he was in the womb, so it's comforting. But I'm like, wow, why is my heart? It's not beating fast, but it's beating strong. Like, why
You
is
had a
that?
baby in your
Is
womb?
it bad?
You had a baby in
No,
there?
no, the baby was in her womb. No, no, no. The baby was
No.
on me when my baby on me.
Yeah, and the thing is with the carbohydrate intake, especially when we're on high levels of androgens and whatnot, people will notice this, is that when you eat a really, really high carbohydrate meal, your water retention goes through the roof. And that's for a couple of reasons. Like first, because we need that water to drive glycogen into the muscle, like the glucose has glycogen in the muscle. Um, but also it increases our blood volume because our blood glucose goes up and we're drinking all this water. It actually turns on hormones that help us maintain water retention. And that's strictly because blood glucose is a regulated variable. And we can regulate it by insulin driving it in as glycogen. But if we keep eating it and we're already topped up with glycogen in the liver and muscle, then we can end up with higher blood volume. And so when the blood volume goes up, well, then the heart has to take on more blood and it beats harder and it'll beat a little bit faster. So that's that thing you're feeling, Antoine, when you have a high carbohydrate meal is more so a volume loaded thing where your blood volume has gone up.
Mm,
And that's why the heart's going like, like that.
yeah. So there's more blood volume. Is that bad?
I mean, it's bad if it becomes deleterious to your blood pressure or your blood pressure goes up.
Mm,
But having high blood volume is good. We normally regulate it quite well. If our kidneys are functioning properly, we will um, piss it out right over time. So And if you notice also, when you have those high carbohydrate meals, heart's beating really hard, little water retentive, maybe even puffy, and then you start chugging
Mm,
water, there's a flipping point where all of a sudden you're pissing all night. You're just dumping
yeah,
water off, right? And
yeah.
that's when we flip over from that kind of arginine vasopressin side of town back over to like normal kidney function under hydrated conditions.
I'm gonna. It's 40 minutes already, so I'm gonna ask like a couple more questions, and you can answer like quickly if you want. So, what about supplements? Can you name three supplements that could really help with preventing heart attacks? Like, for example, I'm sure you're gonna talk about fish oil, but is there more than that that are good for the to prevent heart attacks?
So, yeah, so preventing them, I'm not going to go out on a soapbox and say that we're going to prevent any heart attacks with supplements,
No,
but to
but just
support
to
heart,
reduce the risks.
yeah, yeah. So to support heart health, there's a couple of good ones. Taurine is actually a really, really good one and real underestimated heart health supplement. A couple grams of taurine a few times a day helps quite a bit. I use it in a lot of clients who have AFib or atrial fibrillation when their heart rate gets too high. These are more like muscle endurance sprinting type people, but yeah. So taurine's a good one. Another one is obviously going to be something that reduces inflammation. So get a really good curcumin or turmeric supplement in there. Make sure that your omegas are obviously optimized. You're taking enough of those. And also make sure that if you are supplementing with minerals, okay, so if you're using like Relight or something along those lines, that you're not using it in abundant overabundance because we don't want to have potassium and salt levels getting too high. That's super important.
Yeah, that's one thing that freaks me out about these prime energy drinks. It's like there's low sodium, but like 700 milligram of potassium in it. You know Logan Paul and Jake
Yeah.
Paul, they have these prime drinks. Why the fuck would they put 700 milligram of potassium and a low amount of sodium? It just confuses me because they taste really good. I like to have one once in a while when I'm at the corner store when I put gas. I'll just grab one. But it's like why? Like if I would drink three of those a day, I would probably kill myself at some point.
Well, if your kidneys are working fine, you're okay. Here's what the problem is.
Yeah,
A
but
lot
it's
of
like
bodybuilders have no fucking clue if their kidneys are working fine. So,
yeah, you
yeah.
got to do blood work. So actually, I'm gonna segue into the other question. What are some tests that you would really recommend for bodybuilders who's never done some tests before to go in and ask the doctor to prescribe these tests for the heart? And obviously, I'm sure blood work is part of that. And what markers should be checked?
Yeah, so you're gonna obviously get your baseline CBC, so a complete blood count, your blood cells, so know what your red cells look like, know what your white cells look like. That just gives us a picture of general health. You'll also want to get a kidney panel, which will include measuring creatinine, and they calculate EGFR or your estimated glomerular filtration rate, which is how well your kidneys are functioning, and then as well as the electrolytes. And that's going to be real important for you to understand kind of, am I regulating minerals properly? Um, you may want to also get a look at what your blood magnesium looks like, red blood cell magnesium, if they'll do it. Highly likely they won't do that on the first test, but if you can get it done, it's nice to know because, to be honest, magnesium is an excellent another heart health supplement that a lot of people are deficient in. And so, I always recommend magnesium for bodybuilders. Get, 400 milligrams or so of magnesium bisglycinate, every night. Um, Remember, that's not 400 milligrams of magnesium that's in there because it's got the glycinate attached to it and all that shit. So, but 400 milligrams of magnesium
Mm.
bisglycinate before bed, and some glycine so that that's also good for the heart. But overall, in the blood panel, if you can get those electrolytes done, that's great. Then understand your liver function panel, okay, which can get a little bit muddy when you're a bodybuilder and you're training a lot because sometimes we see, things like ALT and AST a little elevated. But get a liver panel so you know that your liver functions decent. HSCRP or high sensitivity, another in there. Um, get an CRP done because C-reactive protein goes up with inflammation. And inflammation, like I've mentioned a few times, is one of the primary drivers of cardiovascular disease, and especially underlying low-grade inflammation that we may or may not know exists. Um, Ferritin is another one. It will actually be elevated in cases of high inflammation, especially associated with autoimmunity, which you may not know that you have some sort of autoimmune disorder, or you just could be under some sort of high level of inflammation that's driving ferritin up. And then finally, lipids and blood glucose. And blood glucose
Mhm.
comes in a couple flavors, right? We've got our fasting blood glucose that tells us what it is the day of the test at that time. And then HbA1c, which gives us a picture of the last couple of months of what your blood glucose looks like. Make sure those are both in check. And then obviously your blood lipids, HDL, LDL, triglycerides. What you want to watch for is if you have dyslipidemia or issues with your cholesterol, and you have slightly elevated HbA1c, so say it's sitting at like 6 or 7, and you've got slightly elevated HSCRP, so say it's sitting at 5 or 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. None of those on their own will really flag off a physician and say, like, oh no, you're going to die of whatever. But those three together, even when they're at the highest ranges of normal, can actually set you up down the road for cardiovascular disease. And the reason why I say
Mhm.
that is because if you're doing the juice and you're getting older and you're trying to get to 300 pounds, those fucking measurements aren't going to get any better if you're not paying attention to them. So it's really important to know what those are
Yeah,
at a really young age.
yeah, that's true. And so that's for all the blood work. But what about some tests you could ask to really check the other parts of the heart? Like there's the EKG, that's one of them. There's a ultrasound, right? That's another one that you
Yep.
can have. And so usually it's ultrasound, EKG. What's is there another one they do usually? The
Yeah,
first few
you can have
ones they do.
you can have an angiogram or CT scan, but those are going to be like if
Those
they
are
see
harder
other
to
things.
have.
Oh yeah, way harder.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you go in
yeah,
basically if you want to get your heart function tested. So the bloods are going to tell you about what the heart's environment looks like. But if you want to get your heart function tested and you're young and you think that your physician might not do it, tell them you don't want to go in for a stress test. And they'll ask you why and just say, I don't know, sometimes it feels like my heart beats weird and sometimes it feels like it stops and then it goes again and then it goes really fast and it slows down. And what they'll do is they'll hook you up to an EKG, electrocardiogram, ECG, EKG, and then they'll run you through a walking treadmill test as they raise it. And they get the elevation up pretty good. And then they can look at your heart and what it does under stress. And it doesn't really matter whether it's stress from the EDM party or if it's stress from, work or whatever else. When you're walking on that treadmill, it will show up. And so
yeah.
really, really good to have that. If that fails, generally then if they're looking at your labs and they're looking at that, they might send you for further testing. Especially if you couldn't make it through the stress test because they had to shut it down.
Hmm. Okay. So there's the EKG, ultrasound, the blood work, stress test, and the COSM score testing, angiogram. Those are all the ones that are really good. If you want to check out how your heart is, this is what you got to do. All these things. So that's good. That's people should, if they're really concerned, or even if they're not concerned, like just maybe you got something wrong you don't even know that you were born with. So it's good to check it out. And before I let you go, let's say if somebody's competing or they're in the off season, they want to, they use gear and stuff. What are some things that should be avoided, or at least done to like a really, really short amount of time or a very low dose? What are some things that should not be dose high, and what are some things that you should avoid if you want to really reduce the risk of heart attacks in the future for bodybuilders?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about rest and relaxation at all, or meditation, or breathing, or any of that stuff. But, one of the things that's really missing in the industry, and I was guilty for it when I was sitting at 260, 270 pounds, is being able to get ourselves in a state of relaxation. And
Mm.
and so that your off season shouldn't be stressful, even though you're trying to put on weight and everything else should be stressful. So that right off the bat, that should be paramount, is learning how to bring yourself into relaxation. That might be just picking up a sport that you haven't done for ages that, you can go out and fuck around with. Might be like you when you were doing hot yoga and we were doing breathing and everything else. But you want to be out of the scene of what you do hour by hour, day by day, year by year, so that you can bring yourself into a state of relaxation, because the stress is coming anyway. And being a bodybuilder, a strength athlete, any of these is stressful in itself, because you're putting yourself in states of stress every time you train. So sleep and relaxation are going to be, your two biggest things that you can do. It's going to grow more muscle. So right off the bat, if the whole idea of your off season is to get bigger, then you'll be fine, because you now you're gonna grow much better. And Antoine, you can attest to this very well. Second one is
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
minimum effective dosing of PEDs. And what I mean by that is you don't want to be going into your competition season on all the fucking drugs that you're on in your post in your sort of your preseason, because you have to leave room for adding those compounds in. And so you can do a very, very successful health break, I guess they call it now, on 300 milligrams of test, and spend time to get your blood work unfucked from your show. AV, you can attest to this. Remember when you came
yeah,
off of the Olympia, and we wanted to go right into I think we wanted to get right into like the Arnold or something, and I was like, man, our blood work is still shit. We got to keep working on this. And you did, and we got it good, and then you
yeah.
came back better than
And
ever.
I think it was Chicago. I think it was the first time
Chicago,
we worked
Chicago.
together was for
Yeah,
Chicago. Yeah, and then I actually downsized. It was after the custom score. I downsized. I was down to like 270 in the off season,
yeah.
which is like, and I wasn't like that lean, so it was like not. I was subpar compared to my usual self, and people would see me online. But what happened is that once we restarted prep, and then we were eating like so good and stuff, and actually came in the best shape of my life, in my opinion. And then we won Chicago Pro. Then we did the Olympia after that. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's
healthy bodies
so
build
I
muscle. Like you can't
yeah.
build fucking muscle when your body's trying to fight disease.
And I think at some point for bodybuilders, especially the pros, once you've reached a good amount of mass, I don't think in the off season you should. I don't think it's that beneficial to just fucking force feed yourself to try to get to like a even more size. I find that if you just clean your receptors in the off season, eat super well, and just try to like maintain what you have, and then when prep is begins, you'll reinstate some compounds, and then you'll just so let's say if somebody is maxed out all year, and then during prep they just get their size and they get leaner, they'll get to a certain point. But you could just like maintain all year on like almost nothing, and then you're gonna get to this super quick improvement in prep, and you might be even better than the guy who was on all year. It's like that's what Kevin Levrone would do. He would just take this 6 months off. I think he said he would not even training, which I would never do that, but then he would just blow up for 6 months. So it's like I think guys are just like they're scared of being small. They're scared of losing their gains in the off season, and but it's called off season now. For some people, it's just non-diet on season, right?
Yeah,
It's like they're
and your
pre-contest the whole year.
digestive health, if it's shitty going into your prep, you're not going to look great when you get on stage. So you have to,
No.
not force feed. Obviously, get the calories in. We need those, but protect your organs as much as you can in that off season, because in the competition season, it's pedal to the metal. Especially if you don't qualify for the O the first time, and now you got to do one or two more shows. You got to come in
Mm.
healthy.
Yeah, there's some bodybuilders pros that are on the spotlight, and a guy who used to be a coach. He would some of his athletes would not even make it to the show, and there were rumors of like things that they would do. We don't know really, but I've seen it happen. It's like guys will like not even last to the show because their stomach is all messed up, and
Yeah.
it's not that uncommon among the pros. And it doesn't happen the first year either that you're pushing, right? It's always like the third, fourth year you push nonstop. Something gives up, and then they got to pull back and just reassess. But anyway, I think that's a good podcast, Dwayne. I hope it helped a lot of people. Yeah, and if people want to actually get taken care of by Dr. Dwayne, it's possible. You're taking clients, right, regarding all this health stuff, diet stuff,
I
and
do, I do, and I do
anything.
a lot of consultations too with a lot of guys. Actually, the exact people we're talking about. So absolutely,
Yeah, yeah. So if they actually want to have a one-on-one with Dwayne to ask personal questions with their own things, he's taking on clients and consultations. So that you can reach him out on drdwaynejackson.com.
drdwaynejackson.com, or find me on Instagram at
Yeah,
drdnjackson and shoot me a DM.
yeah. You can
Slip
slide in
me.
his DMs. He'll be. I think his wife is fine with that for these type of conversations, right?
You can slide one in,
All right, well,
absolutely.
Dwayne, yeah. So enjoy your time in Lisbon, Portugal, and thanks for coming on again. And I hope it helps some people here. And comment below. If you have some issues, you have some questions, I'll go through the comments. I always go the first hour usually. I always go through the comments and answer and help people. And yeah,